Hello and welcome back to With It. On today's show we are going to go over 3 incidents with airplanes with their air traffic controllers where they're discussing lights up in the sky that they had ended up seeing or that flew by them in 2 of the cases. So stick around, going to be a good episode. Very interesting story, so stick around. Okay, on February 28th, 1996, there was a commercial airliner that was heading from Cleveland to Saginaw, Michigan. I'm in Michigan here. This plane was heading in from Cleveland. When it got about 15 miles from Saginaw, it called up its ATC in Cleveland and says, "Do you have anything on the radar in front of me? I'm seeing a light just below the cloud deck, about 10 miles out." ATC pops in and says, "No, I got nothing in front of you at all. I got nothing around you in the area." So he says, "Well, yeah, it's down below the clouds." And then another plane that's coming out of Detroit, this one's Masala 3179, they call in and they say, "Is that a light 25 miles north of Detroit, northwest of Detroit?" And Flight 5959 says, "Yes." And he says, "Yeah, we saw the same thing. The flight underneath the clouds gets brighter, looks like it gets dimmer and flickers." So the air traffic control goes back to 5959, the flight that it's sending over to Saginaw, and asks if it still sees it out there. And he says, "That's affirmative, and it looks like a pulsating light that's got a light that's spinning around it like a frisbee." So this thing is pulsating. It's below the clouds. The air traffic control asked him about what level it was at, and he says it's tough to tell. We're in between layers. So there's clouds. One of the cloud layers below them is at about 10,000 feet. Don't know how high the other layer was, but he says I would guesstimate it's about 10,000 feet. So the air traffic controller goes ahead and hands him off 5959, tells him to contract Saginaw approach. So that's the handoff from Cleveland to Saginaw. Now, Flight 3179, he reports that he is seeing the light and that it's kind of underneath the clouds and it's flickering. So Cleveland Air Traffic Control asks, is it a beacon maybe? Some kind of a weird thing where a beacon light off the ground is making a light up in the clouds. He says, "Well, no, it seems about 10,000 feet. It's up in the air. It's not on the ground. And it's consonant." He says it looks white, and then he says, "Well, now it looks a little red and a little green." So this thing is sitting there, just hovering in the same spot. At first he said it looked like oncoming traffic, which would be a light that's coming at you from another plane, but it's just sitting there the whole time. They have been watching it for 10 to 15 minutes since they were coming out of Detroit. He says, "Well, I'm going to flick my lights at it and see if it does anything. We'll see if we got a passenger that has a camera on board, maybe get a picture of it." Well, at this time, Flight 5959, who he handed off to Saginaw approach, pops back in and says, "Yeah, I wanted to keep you under advisement." He says, "We got our clearance down to 4,000 feet. He says, as we drop below 10,000 feet, he says, that object is above us. It's at about 10,000 feet, and it's just sitting there and it's pulsating. It is just weird." So he updates him. He says that he'll update him when he lands, the air traffic controller. Now the air traffic controller gets back on with 3179. They actually got a passenger to give them a camera, Instamatic camera, and they're taking a photo. So they're just turning to their right. It's just off the left side of the plane now. The pilot on the left side takes 2 or 3 photos. One of them's of the light that's below the deck, and then he takes at least one that includes the stars so that they can tell which one it is. But he says the lowest light is what you're looking at. And he says, "Okay, we'll have to file a report. Thanks for the update." And the recording stops. That's the first that we're going to go over, where the air traffic control could not pick up the object on their radar. Couldn't see it anywhere there, but 2 pilots called in that this same light was sitting in the same spot at about the same altitude off the ground at about 10,000 feet, just below the clouds. So that's our first incident. And these can be found, there's a audio book, UFOs, Pilots, and Police Recordings. And that's where I got these three from. These three I'm going to go through. There's a few others on there, but these are the three that kind of stick with me to where it's kind of strange what ends up happening, especially in these next two. So that's our first story of the Saginaw light that was just hovering over by the airport a little ways outside of Saginaw. So on November 18th of 1995, flight's coming out, Lufthansa 405 is heading out. It sounds like they're heading west out of New York. And he's flying along, and he's at about 28,000 feet, I believe it is. And he calls into air traffic control, which is in Boston, which is why I think he took off and he's heading out away from Boston. He's under Boston air traffic control. So Lufthansa 405 asks if he has any traffic off of their left wing. And this air traffic controller responds, no, I don't have anything around you within 30 miles. So there's nothing in his radar from around 30 miles. So now Lufthansa 405 says, well, this just passed me off my left sideline mile about 2,000 to 3,000 feet above me, and it should be about 10 miles behind me. We just passed it a minute ago. Now there's a Speedbird. The Lufthansa, of course, is a plane. Well, Speedbird is British Airways call sign. Speedbird 226 calls in and says, yeah, I had the same thing, fly just by my left sideline mile, just above about 1,000, 2,000 feet above me. And that happened about 3 minutes ago. And so now they go back to the air traffic controllers, again, can't see anything on their radar. So he asked Lufthansa 405, again, was that on its left side or right side? He says it was off my left side. He says, how far away was it? He says, well, it was very close. It was off my left side within a mile and 2,000 to 3,000 feet above me. He says it had a big light, white bright light on the front and a green trail coming out of the back, a green smoke trail coming out of the back of this thing. So then Speedbird 226 pops in and says, yeah, I saw the same thing. It was a big bright light on the front and a long green trail in the back that was very heavy. It looked like smoke. So now this air traffic controller says, well, I'll see what I can find out. He contacts another air traffic controller and asks about another flight and says, did you work him? And the guy says, yeah. And he says, did he say anything strange, report anything odd? He says, no. And then he says, a bunch of other pilots reported a meteor. So the green trail coming off the back. These other pilots obviously had caught that. And of course, they're going to think it's a meteor. I mean, what else is going to be up there like that? He says a meteor, these guys said that it passed 2,000 to 3,000 feet above them off their left sideline mile. And this guy's like, really, that is neat. He says, yeah, they said it looked like an airplane with a big white light in the front and a green trail coming out of the back. He says, well, ask them how fast this was going and I'll listen. So now the other air traffic controller is listening to the main air traffic controller get back to Lufthansa. And he says, what speed do you think it was going at? He says, well, it's hard to tell. It was going in the opposite direction. Speedbird 226 jumps in. Says, yeah, it was, it looked like faster than normal aircraft. And it had the white light and the thick green trail out of the back. Lufthansa 405 pops back in and says, yeah, you know, there was just a big bright light in the front and a green trail off the back. There was no green, no red lights, and it looked like a UFO. So the Speedbird said that it could have been, at first he thought it was opposite traffic. He says, but then again, it might not have been a normal aircraft. So it sounds like the Lufthansa 405 got a better look at it as it was going by than he did. So now they said, well, there's nothing we can do. We don't know what this thing is. So they asked him, and they were saying, you know, these other people were reporting a meteor. Are you sure it wasn't a meteor? And Lufthansa 405 says, well, I don't know. So low, I wouldn't think it's a meteor. Speedbird 226 jumps in and says, well, you know, it looked like faster than normal aircraft, and it had that stuff coming off the back, and it couldn't have been a meteor because it was in level flight. And obviously it passed two of them within a minute. A meteorite would have been down on the ground after it's sped past the first plane. So that's the ending of that recording. But again, you have a craft, some kind of a craft up in the air. Radar is not picking this up. 2 planes end up seeing this one again, and there's no answers to that one. And I didn't see any kind of a follow-up on any of these 3, although I'm still going to try to dig and see what I can find through my newspapers. But currently I haven't found one. I found a bunch of newspaper reports from a lot of these sightings that we'll go over eventually, just the ones that I think have some credence to where we're not going to be able to explain them. These ones might be explained away, but they get odder as we go. We had the floating light. Now we have a plane that passes so close that if it was a regular plane, they would have, kept them further away from a plane, especially when there's nothing else in their airspace. They're not going to have 2 planes that close. So that's another odd one, and we'll get into the last one. A little bit of discussion, and that'll be it for the show. March 26, 1995. There's a plane. This is Cactus, so that's American West. That's our call sign. Cactus Flight 546. It pops up as it's over by Roswell, New Mexico. It's near Taiwan. And he pops up into the air traffic controller and says, hey, do you guys have any information on a flight that's over here that we just passed off of? It kind of flew by us, saw it go down the side of the plane when we were over by Taiwan. It's, and he says, well, no, we don't have any reports of anything like that. We don't, let me check and see. So you hear him talking to this air traffic controller is talking to another few planes, giving them directions on what to do. And then he gets back to Cactus 546 and says, yeah, we don't have anything on the radar. Nobody knows anything about that. And the guy says, the pilot of Cactus 546 says, nobody's painting that on their radar. And he says, could you repeat that? And he says, nobody's picking that up on their radar, that object that's up in the air. And the air traffic controller says it's up in the air. He says, affirmative. And he says, no, we don't know anything about that. What level was it flying at? He says, well, we're at 39,000 feet. He says, I would say it's about 30,000 feet. He says, and it was off to the side of us, and there was a storm, a lightning storm in between them and the object. And he says when it lightning, you could see it, and it was a long craft, and it had like a strobe going counterclockwise near the rear end of it. And he says it was just eerie looking, and it was very large. So the air traffic controller starts getting a hold of other air traffic controllers and contacts this one and says, hey, we're looking for something up in Taiwan. Have you seen it? About 30,000 feet. And they said it was long with kind of a strobe on it. And he says, no, we're not picking anything up here. And that was it for that. So then 546, Cactus 546 comes back on and says, 3 of us were up here talking about it. So they're huddling in the front of the airplane. He says, the 3 of us that saw it, he says that was weird because when we saw it, it lightninged and you could see it. And he says that it was just eerie looking, and it was about 300 to 400 feet long. So you're talking at least a football field long, whatever they saw. And it's explained like it's a fuselage without wings, like an airplane without wings, but 300 to 400 feet long. And they only saw flashes of it when the lightning would flash. And they're along by this storm now. But they do see a plane come back the other side, and he contacts air traffic control. Says, this plane that's heading that way that we just passed, is that going to be in that area? And he says, yeah, it'll be there in about 3 or 4 minutes. He says, see if they see anything in that storm cloud off to their left. They contact this plane on RK-5, it sounds like. And it sounds like a military plane the way that this guy's talking. And he says, well, when you get down there, look off your right side and see if you can see anything in the clouds. And then he contacts 546 again and says, which was that, on your north or south? He says it was on our north. And then he gets back to RK-5 and he says, make that out your left window. See if you can't see anything in the storm out your left side window. Now, that RK-5 pops back in, and this guy was joking on his way to go look. He says, when they first said, go up there, it's about 30,000 feet. Somebody saw it. It's not a plane. It looks like a long tubular thing with a strobe on it. He says, okay, I'm searching for ET. And they said, about 39,000 feet right in that storm cloud. He says, okay, searching for ET. So he's making fun of it as he's going out there, this pilot. He jumps back in nervously right after he was told to look for it out his left window. He says, this is RK5, do I have anything going off my left wingtip right now? They said, no, we don't have anything on our radar. So now they're not picking up whatever just went by him on his radar. He says, it just went off my left wingtip. And then that cuts off because now they're going to get a hold of another air traffic controller, and this is a woman, and it sounds like this is a military base because they're asking if they have any balloons up, if they have anything up there. And she's like, no, we don't have anything up there. And he says, you're not picking anything up over in Taiban or the area? And she's like, no. He says, yeah, over in Tucumcari is where it'll be. And she's like, no, I'm not picking anything up, but we see everything that you see. And he's like, I know. He says, these guys in an American West, they ended up seeing, it sounds like a UFO right out of the X-Files. And she said, oh, you're serious? And he says, yeah, they're very serious. He says, 3 of them said that it was up there and said the thing was, she says, well, how high was it? And he says, it was about 30,000 feet. And she says, he says, but it was like a hot dog without wings type thing. And he says that they said it was 300, 400 feet long. And she goes, holy smokes. She says, yeah. He says, so I don't know if it was a weather balloon. And she says, well, I don't know. It could have been this other thing that we have up there, but they're not that size. They're not that big. So he's like, okay. And then she says, well, no, can't help you. And she gets off of the communication. Now, he goes back to talk to 546 and tells him, yeah, we can't find anything on that. And 546 says, well, there's a military base out there. Was that to the north of us or south? Now, this pilot wants to hear it's to the north of him where he ended up seeing this thing. And air traffic controller says, no, those areas, those restricted areas are to the south of you. And they're not active. There shouldn't be anything going on up there. And you can hear how confused he is because he just makes a noise like, huh, like he can't believe the answer. So this pilot's all confused, and now the lady from the radar jumps back in. And she says, yeah, we just got a call from there from somebody about a UFO. And the guy says, yeah. And she says, well, I might have picked something up where you guys said this. And he gave her, she asked when he got a hold of her the first time, how far off of Holloman is it? So she wanted coordinates off of another city, Holloman, instead of the city he was giving her. He gave her the coordinates. Sure enough, she's picking this thing up on search only, which means that they have their radar, which is probably normally set to get the call signs from the flights. But she ended up searching with the radar only and picked this thing up. And she says, yeah, we've been tracking it for about 3 to 4 minutes. It's doing about 390 knots, which is fast. That's aircraft fast, but it isn't outside of the realm of something we could make fast. But yeah, she had followed it for 3 to 4 minutes, and they were tracking that thing, and it was probably about 60 miles from where it was just 10 minutes earlier when she was gotten a hold of from it. And she says, yeah, well, she gives him the coordinates, and that's pretty much it. That one drops off at that point. You don't find out what they ended up seeing. What you do hear in there is a couple of little break-ins of radio transmissions where it sounds like they're talking to that RK5 still, asking him if it's in the lightning. So it sounds like whatever it was in this lightning storm that this plane went over there to check on it after this Cactus 546 saw it. So, 546 asked them about it. They didn't get anything on their radar. Nobody got anything on their radar until that one radar station checked without call signs and just went and searched the air with their radar and got kicked back that they found something that doesn't have any call signs. It's up there flying around. So, multiple planes have seen this, and again, you couldn't pick it up on the radar. Now, all 3 of these, the hovering light, the plane going the opposite direction. They didn't say it was going so fast that we couldn't make something like that. So all these things are definitely in the realm of us being able to make them. I just question whether, especially on the second story, where the thing was so close to 2 planes on the left side going by them, that I don't think the military would do something like that. That would be too close for comfort for planes like that. But if they're testing something out, they're probably going to be secretive. I just don't think they're going to test it out, you know, around commercial aircraft, no matter what it is. And that's when we get into the Phoenix lights. That's the one that really makes me think there's something going on that isn't from here. These things could be from here. It could be explained from here. Even that 300 to 400 feet long thing doing 390 knots, who knows? Did they come up with something with little wings? There are planes with little tiny wings where, you know, they mess around with trying to be able to break the sound barrier without having the disruptive explosion that happens when it does it. And that's why they used to have the flights from the supersonic planes pretty much at the water, is because they're just gonna, once they break the sound barrier, it shatters windows below them and does kind of strange things. So could be something like that where they're, you know, testing something new kind of thing out. But just an odd one. And that one where the pilot saw the thing, because you could hear in his voice, he was a little scared of whatever it was that he saw. And that other pilot that sounded like a military pilot, he definitely sounded scared when he asked if something just went off his left wingtip, because he's out there making fun of the thing, and it sounds like he ran right into it, that it went right by him. So three crazy cases. Doesn't prove anything. You know, me, myself, I'm to the thing where, yeah, there's things out there that we don't know about, but I don't know that there's something in them. I mean, some of these things change direction so quickly, it would smash something like a bug in the wall. So unless they figured out some kind of an anti-gravity thing for inside there, where you're not having that kind of centrifugal forces, the forces from gravity, when you make a sudden change, you'd have to offset that somehow, and I don't think you'd be able to do that. So who knows what these things are, but these are just the first few of quite a few of these kind of UFO shows that we're going to do. Just like I said, going over things that they could be something from somewhere else, they could be something that we made, you just never know. But these ones, especially like I said, the second and third story that we just went over, a little bit creepy that you know, they're not picking these things up on the radar. And even the planes that we have, you can still pick them up on your radar. It's just you got such a small, it's a bunch of different angles, and it's not reflective material. That's why they use carbon fiber and things like that. So, but you still get a radar ping from them if you're searching for them. But, you know, seems that one radar picked up the big one over in New Mexico and was able to track it 3 to 4 minutes. It's up to you. What do you guys think? I mean, to me, I just don't know. I just don't think that they would fly those things. And if they're flying that thing in a storm, like it sounds like it's in the lightning, that's a very odd place to be flying. Most planes avoid storms. So another odd thing with that case. That's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back probably in another week or so for another episode. But until then, if you see something that makes you ask, you know, what in the hell was that? Put it down in the comments and we'll take a look and see what we can find. Thanks for watching.